Hey there, welcome back. We're diving into some jaw-dropping Reddit tales tonight that showcase just how unpredictable people can be. I've got a father who fell for something that seemed too perfect to be real. A guy who discovered physical attraction isn't everything when you're building something meaningful. A fitness journey that taught someone what balance actually looks like. A woman who took a chance on someone unexpected and found exactly what she needed. And a lunch thief mystery that taught someone not to jump to conclusions. These drop every night, so hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Now, grab something to nibble, and let's get straight to the madness. Our first story covers a super uncomfortable situation between a professor and his students. I went to a small private Christian university for my undergrad. We're talking maybe 1,500 students total. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and your professors actually remember your name. I'd chosen it specifically because I wanted that close community feeling, and the religious foundation was important to my family. I was a junior, taking this upper-level history course about early American religious movements. The class only had 12 students in it, which was pretty typical for specialized courses at our school. Our professor was this guy, in his late 30s, named Dr. Harrison. He had this distinctive look, kind of resembled that actor from those action movies, you know the one. Sharp jawline, intense eyes. Some of the girls in class definitely had crushes on him, though they'd never admit it out loud at a Christian school. Dr. Harrison was actually a really engaging teacher. He made the material interesting, encouraged debate and discussion, treated us like adults rather than children. I genuinely enjoyed the class and was learning a lot. He'd been at the university for about 5 years and seemed well respected in the department. About halfway through the semester, I started noticing something odd. There was this freshman girl, Emma, who wasn't in our class, but I'd see her hanging around after our sessions ended. She'd be in the hallway or sitting on a bench outside the building, always on her phone but clearly waiting for something or someone. At first, I didn't think much of it. Lots of students hang out in the humanities building between classes. But I started seeing her there consistently, always around the time our history class ended. And I noticed Dr. Harrison would sometimes linger after class, taking his time packing up his materials until most students had left. One day, I forgot my notebook in the classroom and came back about 10 minutes after class ended to grab it. The door was slightly open and I heard voices inside. Dr. Harrison and someone else, speaking quietly. I knocked and pushed the door open, and there was Emma sitting on the edge of one of the desks, laughing at something he'd said. They both looked startled when I walked in, and the energy in the room felt off. Too casual, too familiar. Dr. Harrison quickly shifted into professional mode, asked if I'd forgotten something, and I grabbed my notebook and left. But something about the interaction stuck with me. The way they'd both reacted when I entered, like they'd been caught doing something they shouldn't be doing. I started paying more attention after that. Emma was always around when our class ended. I'd see her and Dr. Harrison walking together across campus sometimes, always maintaining a careful distance, but clearly together. Once, I saw them getting coffee at the student union, sitting at a corner table, leaning in close to talk. None of this was technically proof of anything inappropriate. Teachers and students can have conversations. Maybe she was interested in his field and he was mentoring her. Maybe they were discussing a research project. But my gut told me something wasn't right. The turning point came about 3 weeks later. I was leaving the library late one night, around 11. The campus was pretty empty at that hour. I was walking to the parking lot when I saw 2 people standing between cars in a dark corner of the lot. They were close together, very close, and as I got nearer, I realized it was Dr. Harrison and Emma. They were kissing. I froze. My first instinct was to turn around and leave before they saw me, but they'd already pulled apart, and Dr. Harrison had spotted me. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the parking lot. Then he said something to Emma. She rushed to her car, and he walked quickly in the opposite direction. Nobody acknowledged what had just happened. I sat in my car for probably 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd seen. A professor at our Christian university was having a relationship with a freshman student. This wasn't just inappropriate, it was definitely against university policy, absolutely contrary to everything our school claimed to stand for, and a massive abuse of his position of power. But what was I supposed to do about it? If I reported it, I'd be destroying Dr. Harrison's career. He'd definitely get fired, probably struggle to find another teaching position, his reputation would be ruined, and Emma would become the subject of campus gossip and judgment. At a small Christian school, this kind of scandal would follow both of them forever. On the other hand, if I said nothing, I was enabling behavior that was wrong on multiple levels. Dr. Harrison was in a position of authority, and Emma was barely an adult, only 18 or 19. Even if she thought she wanted this relationship, the power dynamics made it inherently coercive. He was taking advantage of her naivety and exploiting his position. I didn't sleep that night. I kept going back and forth between convincing myself it wasn't my business and feeling like I had a moral obligation to report what I'd seen. By morning, I'd decided I needed more information before making any decisions. I started doing some research on Dr. Harrison, just basic stuff at first, looking at the university website, his faculty profile, his published work. Then I went deeper. I found his social media profiles, which were pretty locked down, but I could see his profile pictures. In several of them, he was wearing a wedding ring. I found a few photos that appeared to be from family events. In one, he was with a woman and 2 young children. My stomach dropped. He wasn't just having an inappropriate relationship with a student, he was married with kids and having an affair with a teenage freshman. This was so much worse than I'd initially thought. I felt physically sick. Those kids in the photos, they had no idea their dad was doing this. That wife had no idea her husband was betraying her with a student young enough to be his daughter. And Emma probably had no idea he was married. I'd never seen him wear his ring on campus. He must have taken it off before coming to work each day. Now, I really didn't know what to do. The situation had gone from complicated to absolutely catastrophic. But I couldn't pretend I didn't know. I couldn't just go to class and act like everything was normal while this was happening. I decided I had to report it, but I needed to be strategic about how. I couldn't go to Dr. Harrison's department head because there was a chance they might try to cover it up to avoid scandal. Small private schools sometimes prioritize reputation over doing the right thing. Instead, I made an appointment with the Dean of Students. I told her I needed to discuss a sensitive matter regarding faculty conduct. When I met with her, I laid out everything I'd observed. The repeated meetings between Dr. Harrison and Emma, the coffee dates, what I'd witnessed in the parking lot, the fact that he was married with children. I tried to present just the facts without editorializing, though my disgust probably came through anyway. The dean's face got progressively more serious as I talked. When I finished, she asked if I had any physical evidence, like photos. I didn't. She asked if anyone else had witnessed any of this. Not that I knew of. She asked if I'd confronted Dr. Harrison or spoken to Emma. I said no, I'd come directly to her. She thanked me for reporting this and said the university would investigate immediately. She also warned me that I needed to keep this conversation completely confidential. If word got out before they'd completed their investigation, it could compromise their ability to handle the situation properly. I agreed. The next week was absolutely surreal. I had to go to class and act normal around Dr. Harrison, knowing what I knew and what I'd set in motion. He taught the same as always, gave assignments, led discussions. If he suspected I'd reported him, he didn't show it. Emma continued showing up after class sometimes, though maybe less frequently. Then, 8 days after my meeting with the dean, an email went out to everyone enrolled in Dr. Harrison's classes. Due to unforeseen circumstances, Dr. Harrison was no longer teaching at the university. Our classes would be taught by Professor Martinez from the history department for the remainder of the semester. No explanation, no details, just that abrupt notification. The campus exploded with rumors. Everyone had a theory about what happened. Some people thought he'd had a family emergency. Others speculated he'd gotten a better job offer somewhere else. A few people somehow knew or guessed the truth about a relationship with a student, though Emma's name didn't come up in the gossip I heard. Professor Martinez took over our class and did her best to get us back on track with the curriculum. But the whole situation was deeply uncomfortable. We were halfway through the semester, suddenly had a different professor with a different teaching style, and were all wondering what had actually happened. I felt guilty constantly. Guilty that I'd ended Dr. Harrison's career. Guilty that Emma was probably devastated. Guilty that his wife and kids were about to have their lives turned upside down if they hadn't already. But I also felt like I'd done the right thing. Someone in a position of power was exploiting a vulnerable student, and that needed to be stopped. About 2 weeks after Dr. Harrison's departure, I saw Emma on campus looking absolutely miserable. She'd lost weight, had dark circles under her eyes, walked around like a ghost. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that what happened wasn't her fault, that she'd been manipulated by someone who should have protected her. But I also knew that any contact from me could make things worse. I never found out the specific details of what happened to Dr. Harrison after he left. I assume he was fired for cause, which would make it difficult for him to find another teaching position. I hope his wife found out the truth and made whatever decisions were best for her and her children. I hope Emma eventually got support and counselling to process what she'd been through. What I do know is that the university quietly implemented new policies about faculty-student interactions after that semester. Mandatory reporting requirements for staff who witness inappropriate relationships, clearer guidelines about fraternization, training sessions about power dynamics and consent. The scandal had apparently scared them enough to take preventative action. My friends and family still don't know I was the one who reported him. I've never told anyone except for writing this now. It's not something I'm proud of exactly, but it's also not something I'm ashamed of. I saw something wrong and I reported it. A girl who was barely an adult was being taken advantage of by a married professor who used his position and charm to manipulate her. Did I ruin Dr. Harrison's life? Probably. Did he deserve it? I think so. He made the choice to pursue a student. He made the choice to cheat on his wife. He made the choice to violate the trust placed in him as an educator. I just made sure there were consequences for those choices. Did I potentially traumatize Emma by forcing this situation into the open? Maybe. But leaving her in that relationship would have caused more trauma in the long run. She was being groomed and manipulated by someone twice her age who held power over her academic and social environment. Getting her out of that situation was the right call, even if the short-term pain was significant. The hardest part was reconciling my faith with my actions. At a Christian university, we're taught about forgiveness and redemption. Some people might argue I should have spoken to Dr. Harrison privately, given him a chance to end the affair on his own, tried to handle it with grace and mercy. But I also believe in protecting the vulnerable and holding people accountable for their actions. Forgiveness doesn't mean enabling harm. I graduated the following year and left that campus behind. But I still think about that situation sometimes. I wonder if Dr. Harrison ever got his life together. I wonder if his marriage survived. I wonder if Emma healed from the experience and moved forward. I wonder if I handled everything correctly, or if there was a better way. What I'm certain of is that small, private Christian universities can be breeding grounds for these kinds of scandals, because everyone is so invested in maintaining the appearance of moral purity. Problems get swept under the rug, victims get silenced, perpetrators get protected because the institution values its reputation over justice. Someone needed to force the issue into the light, and it ended up being me. If I had it to do over again, I'd make the same choice. Even knowing the chaos and pain that followed, some things are worth the discomfort of getting involved. That's the end of that story. These situations are never black and white, but sometimes the right thing to do is still pretty clear, even when it's complicated. At least that's what I tell myself when I question whether I should have just minded my own business. Our next story is about a son who watched his father get manipulated in the cruelest way possible. I never thought I'd be writing this, but here we go. My dad got scammed, and not just any scam. This was psychological warfare disguised as love, and it nearly destroyed what was left of our family. My mom passed away 6 years ago. Cancer. It was brutal watching her fade away over 18 months. And honestly, I don't think my dad ever fully recovered. He tried dating after about 2 years. Nothing serious, just coffee dates here and there that my sister and I encouraged him to go on. He deserved companionship. He deserved to be happy again. But nothing ever stuck. He'd come home and tell us the woman talked about her ex the whole time, or there was no spark, or she wanted someone wealthier, younger, more adventurous. My dad's a good man, a retired high school teacher who loves crossword puzzles and old westerns, but he's not exactly a silver fox action hero. About 8 months ago, he seemed different, lighter. He was smiling at his phone, humming while making coffee, actually caring about what he wore. My sister Emma noticed it first during our weekly family dinner. She asked him point blank if he was seeing someone, and he got this bashful look on his face that I hadn't seen in years. He told us he'd met someone online, a woman named Caroline who lived a few states away but was planning to relocate for work. She was 51, a nurse, divorced with 2 grown kids. She loved classic movies and baking. She sent him recipes. They video chatted every evening. Emma and I exchanged glances, but didn't say anything discouraging. If Dad was happy, we were happy. He showed us pictures. Caroline was attractive, age-appropriate, normal-looking. The photos showed her in scrubs, at what looked like a hospital, in her kitchen with a pie. Nothing seemed off. They talked about meeting in person once she finalized her job transfer. Dad was planning a trip to visit her city in the meantime. Then Dad started asking me about cryptocurrency. He'd never shown interest in investing before, lived off his pension and savings pretty comfortably. But Caroline had mentioned that her brother worked in finance and had made a lot of money in crypto, and she was learning about it herself. Dad wanted to understand it so they'd have more to talk about. I told him to be careful, that crypto was volatile and essentially gambling. He laughed it off, said he wasn't investing anything, just educating himself. 2 months later, Emma called me in a panic. She'd gone to Dad's house to drop off some groceries and found him at his computer, visibly stressed. When she asked what was wrong, he broke down. He'd sent Caroline money, a lot of money. It started small, $500 here and there, when she had unexpected medical bills or car trouble. Then it was $2,000 when her daughter needed emergency dental work. Then $5,000 when her brother's investment opportunity required immediate capital and she'd pay him back triple in a month. Then $10,000 when she claimed her identity had been stolen and her accounts were frozen. Then $15,000 for lawyer fees to resolve it. Dad had sent Caroline $32,500 over a few months. Emma immediately knew something was wrong and started digging. She asked Dad for Caroline's phone number, her last name, anything to verify her identity. Dad got defensive, said Caroline was private about her information because of a bad experience with an ex who'd stalked her. Emma asked to see the video chats. Dad pulled them up. That's when Emma noticed something. The background never changed. Every video showed Caroline in the same room, same lighting, same angle. And when Emma watched closely, Caroline's mouth movements didn't quite sync with her words. The lighting on her face was slightly off from the room behind her. Emma's a graphic designer. She knows about deepfake technology. She screen recorded one of the videos and ran it through a detection tool. The results came back showing strong indicators of artificial intelligence manipulation. Caroline wasn't real. Or rather, Caroline might have been a real person whose photos and videos were being used to create a realistic deepfake, animated in real time during video calls using readily available software. When Emma told Dad, he didn't believe her. refused to, said she was jealous that he'd found happiness, that she wanted him to be lonely forever. It was ugly. Emma left crying. She called me, and I drove straight to Dad's house. We had to stage something like an intervention. I arrived to find Dad in his recliner, staring at his phone. He looked exhausted, older than his 68 years. I sat down and asked him, calmly, to walk me through everything. He did. As he talked, inconsistencies became obvious. Caroline never video chatted at odd hours, only scheduled times. She'd never agreed to meet in person despite months of planning, always had a last-minute emergency. She'd never introduced him to her kids or any friends despite claiming he was so important to her. She knew details about him, but shared very little verifiable information about herself. I asked Dad if he could afford to lose $32,000. He admitted he couldn't. He'd emptied most of his savings. I asked him what he thought would happen next. Would Caroline ask for more? He got quiet. Then he said she'd already asked for $40,000 more. Her brother's investment had gone wrong, and she needed to cover the losses or face legal trouble. She'd promised to pay everything back within 3 months. That's when I saw it. The moment reality crashed through his denial. His face crumpled. He started crying, deep sobs that shook his whole body. He kept saying he was so stupid. How could he be so stupid? He'd taught critical thinking to teenagers for 30 years and he fell for this. I held him while he cried. Emma came back, and we all just sat there. We reported everything to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, knowing we'd probably never recover the money. We contacted Dad's bank to flag any future large transfers. We helped him delete all his online dating profiles and social media accounts. We found him a therapist who specialized in fraud victims because the psychological damage was worse than the financial loss. The cruelest part? About a week after we reported everything, Caroline sent one final message. She said she understood if he needed space, but she wanted him to know she loved him and she'd wait for him. She hoped they could still build a life together. She even sent a video of herself crying, saying she couldn't believe he'd think she was fake, that she'd opened her heart to him, and now he was listening to his children instead of trusting what they had. The manipulation was breathtaking. Even knowing it was artificial intelligence, even seeing the evidence, part of Dad wanted to believe it was real. That's how sophisticated these operations have become. That's how deeply they exploit loneliness. Dad's doing better now, 8 months later. He's back to his routines, spends more time with me and Emma and his grandkids. But something dimmed in him. He's more cautious, more cynical. He doesn't talk about dating anymore. The scam didn't just steal his money, it stole his willingness to be vulnerable again. And that makes me angrier than the financial loss ever could. These people, whoever they are, running these operations with artificial intelligence and deepfakes, they're not just stealing money. They're stealing hope from people who've already lost so much. That's the end of that story. Sometimes the betrayal isn't from someone you know, it's from someone you were manipulated into believing you knew. And that might be even worse. This next one involves a guy who learned that emotional connection matters more than physical attraction, but not before making some questionable choices. I'm just going to say it straight up because I'm not proud of where this story starts. I was in a relationship with someone I didn't really like anymore, and I was developing feelings for someone else. But here's where it gets complicated, because the way it all fell apart taught me well. My girlfriend Jess and I had been together for almost 3 years. We met in college, moved in together after graduation, did the whole young relationship thing. But somewhere around year 2, I realized Jess was emotionally manipulative, not in an obvious way, but in this subtle drip, drip, drip of guilt and criticism. If I wanted to hang out with friends, she'd sigh and mention how little quality time we had together lately. If I was tired after work and wanted a quiet night, she'd accuse me of not caring about her needs. If I disagreed with her about anything, she'd bring up past arguments I thought were resolved and make me feel like a bad partner. I started walking on eggshells, editing my words, avoiding topics. It was exhausting. I should have broken up with her. I know that now. But I kept thinking things would get better, or that maybe I was the problem, or that I was too invested to walk away. Classic sunk cost fallacy. So, instead of dealing with it directly, I started spending more time gaming online. That's where I met Riley. Riley and I played on the same server for a co-op game. We got grouped together randomly and just clicked immediately. She was funny, clever, had this dry sarcasm that made me laugh constantly. We started playing together regularly every night with a group of others. We'd all chat on Discord while playing, and the group's conversations expanded beyond gaming. We talked about work stress, family drama, life goals, everything. I found myself looking forward to logging on more than anything else in my day. I'd rush through dinner with Jess so I could get to my computer. I know how that sounds. I was being that guy. The thing is, I didn't know what Riley looked like. We'd never video chatted, just voice. I had this mental image of her that I'd constructed from her personality. And yeah, I was attracted to that image. She was smart, independent, caring, supportive. Everything felt easy with her. We started messaging each other on Discord, just the two of us. After about 4 months of this, I realized I was falling for her, and she seemed to feel the same way. The conversations got more personal. I tried to stay away from any intimate talk, but things took their natural course. We'd text throughout the day, and I'd have to be smart about my phone. She told me she'd been thinking about me constantly. I admitted the same. We decided we needed to meet. She mentioned she was visiting a friend who lived about 40 minutes from me next month, and maybe we could get coffee. I was nervous and excited and guilty all at once. I knew this meant I had to break up with Jess first. I couldn't meet Riley while still in a relationship, even though mentally and emotionally I'd already checked out. 2 weeks before Riley's visit, Jess and I had a massive fight. I don't even remember what started it, something trivial, but it escalated into her screaming at me about how I'd changed, how I was always distant, how I clearly didn't love her anymore. She wasn't wrong. I told her I thought we should break up. She cried, then got angry, then tried to convince me we could fix things, then got angry again. It took hours. She asked if there was someone else. I said no, which was technically true since I hadn't physically done anything with Riley. Jess didn't believe me, but eventually she left to stay with her sister. We agreed she'd move out officially the following week. I felt relieved and terrible at the same time, but mostly I felt free, and I was counting down the days until I could meet Riley in person. The day came. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop. I got there early, ridiculously nervous. Probably checked myself in the car mirror a few times just to be sure. Then I saw someone walking toward the shop who I thought might be her. She was looking around, clearly searching for someone. I waved. She smiled and waved back. It was Riley. Here's the part where I reveal myself to be a shallow person. Riley was overweight. Not a little bit. Definitely not my type. She was wearing clothes that didn't quite fit right, and she looked nervous and hopeful, and I felt my stomach drop. Because I wasn't attracted to her physically. At all. And I immediately felt like garbage for having that reaction, but I couldn't help it. My mental image shattered instantly. We hugged awkwardly and went inside. The conversation was stilted at first. I was determined to be a gentleman and be friendly, trying to reconcile the Riley I talked to with the Riley in front of me. I tried not to show my disappointment, and probably failed miserably. She seemed to pick up on it. After about 20 minutes, she asked if I was okay, if I was having second thoughts. I lied and said I was just nervous. Ultimately, we spent almost 2 hours together. The conversation got much easier as we went, fell back into our natural rhythm. She was exactly who I'd gotten to know online, funny and thoughtful and kind, but I couldn't shake the physical disconnect. When we said goodbye, we hugged again, and she asked if I wanted to hang out tomorrow. I said I'd let her know, that I had some work stuff to figure out. I drove home feeling confused and guilty. I liked Riley as a person. I genuinely cared about her. But I wasn't physically attracted to her. and I didn't know if that was something I could get past. I know that makes me sound terrible. I'm aware, but I'm trying to be honest here. I spent that night thinking about everything. About Jess and how physical attraction had been there, but emotional connection hadn't. About Riley and how emotional connection was there, but physical attraction wasn't. About whether I was being unfair to expect both. About whether physical attraction could develop over time if everything else was right. And then I thought about something Riley had mentioned in passing during one of our late-night talks. She'd said she used to be really active in school, but had fallen into a sedentary lifestyle over the past few years due to work and stress. She'd mentioned wanting to get back into it, but struggling with motivation. I realized something sitting there in my apartment alone. I'd just ended a relationship where I had surface-level compatibility, but no deeper connection. I was dismissing a potential relationship where I had deep connection, but no surface-level compatibility. What if, instead of writing this off, I was honest with Riley about wanting both of us to prioritize health and see where things went? I called her the next morning. I told her I wanted to see her again, but I also wanted to be honest about something. I said I was working on getting healthier myself, trying to be more active and make better choices, and I'd love if we could encourage each other in that. I didn't directly say the weight thing because I'm not a complete jerk, but I think she understood what I was implying. There was a long pause. Then she said she'd actually been thinking about the same thing, that meeting me in person made her realize she wanted to make some changes. We met up once more before she went back home. We talked about accountability, about setting health goals, about being active together when possible. It felt like maybe this could work. But here's where I made another mistake. About a week after Riley left, Jess texted me. She wanted to talk. She came over and apologized for how things had ended, said she'd been doing some thinking and realized she'd been unfair to me, that she wanted to try again and do better, and I was weak, or stupid, or both. I slept with her. Riley and I were still talking every day, still making plans. I didn't tell her about Jess. I convinced myself it was a one-time thing, a moment of weakness, closure, or whatever. But Jess kept texting, kept wanting to see me, and I kept responding. I was basically dating both of them, long distance with Riley, and in person with Jess. This went on for weeks. 3 weeks, where I felt confused if I should internalize any guilt, or if this was just a part of life. I ultimately ended it with Jess. Told her we weren't getting back together, that things couldn't continue. She was angry, but not surprised. I think she knew I wasn't fully present. Riley said she'd started working with a trainer and a nutritionist. She wanted to feel better physically and mentally. I told her I'd started going to the gym regularly too. We're 6 months into this now. Riley and I are officially together. She's lost quite a bit of weight. I'm in better shape. But more importantly, we're both far happier. The physical attraction grew as I watched her commit to herself and her goals. But the emotional connection was always there, and that's what matters most. I learned that you can't build something real on just one element. You need both, but the emotional foundation has to come first. I still feel guilty about how messy this got, but that's far less drama than others have, I guess. That's the end of that story. Sometimes figuring out what you really want means making mistakes along the way, and hopefully learning from them instead of repeating them. Our next story is about a guy who thought getting in shape would fix his life, but discovered that balance was the real answer. I need to tell you about the past 8 months of my life, because it's been a weird journey from burnout to injury to actually figuring out what I want. This is going to sound dramatic, but I genuinely think I was on the edge of just existing rather than living, and it took hurting myself to realize it. So, context. I'm 27, work a decent office job in finance, nothing exciting but pays well. My routine for the past few years has been identical. Wake up early, shower, grab something quick for breakfast, take the bus to work, sit at a desk for 9 hours, take the bus home, eat something microwavable, game until midnight or 1 in the morning, sleep, repeat. Weekends were the same, except I'd sleep until noon and game longer. I took maybe 2 vacations a year and spent them exactly the same way, just in my apartment instead of going anywhere. I wasn't unhappy exactly, just numb, autopilot. I had online friends I gamed with regularly, but I couldn't tell you the last time I'd seen someone in person outside of work. My family lives across the country. I tried dating apps, but didn't get any romantic prospects. I was fine with all of this until I wasn't. The shift happened after I saw this guy on the train. He was probably my age, clearly in great shape, reading a book on philosophy, looked calm and content. I looked down at myself, soft around the middle, tired with 6 or 7 hours of sleep, holding my phone with no clear path. I felt pathetic. I went home that night, and instead of gaming, I fell into this rabbit hole about fitness and self-improvement. Videos of guys transforming their bodies and lives, testimonials about how working out changed everything, before and after photos. I wanted that. I wanted to feel like I was actually living, instead of just passing time until I died. I decided right then I was going to get in shape. Not just lose a few pounds, but completely transform myself. I spent hours researching. I found this AI-powered meal planning app that would create custom menus based on your goals, preferences, and dietary needs. Most gym guys just ate chicken, rice, and broccoli every day, but I wanted something sustainable and actually tasty. The app created this rotating menu of different cuisines, proper portions, macro breakdowns, everything. I meal prepped that entire Sunday. Monday, I joined a gym. Got there at 6 a.m. before work. I had no idea what I was doing, but I'd watched enough YouTube videos to have a basic plan. I went hard. Squats, deadlifts, bench press, all the compound movements. I felt strong, powerful, like I was finally doing something. I was sore for 4 days. I loved it. It felt like proof that I was changing. I kept going every morning. I was meticulous about the meal plan, tracked everything in an app, counted macros religiously. I stopped gaming as much, needed the sleep for recovery. I started noticing changes within 3 weeks. A little definition in my arms, my pants fitting looser, more energy during the day. It was addictive. I pushed harder every session, adding weight, adding reps, more cardio. 6 weeks in, I was down 15 pounds and felt amazing. People at work noticed, asked what I was doing. I felt proud telling them, felt like I'd discovered this secret to life that everyone should know about. I was sleeping better, had more confidence, felt like a completely different person. Then I overdid it. I was doing deadlifts, trying to hit a new personal record. I'd added 30 pounds to my previous max, which in hindsight was stupid, but I was feeling invincible. I got through a few reps, but on one I felt something in my lower abdomen pull. Not painful exactly, but definitely wrong. I stopped immediately, went home, iced it. Figured I'd just strained something, and it would be fine in a few days. It wasn't fine. The pain stayed. I could barely stand up straight. Walking hurt, sitting hurt. I finally went to my doctor after days of pretending I was okay. The doctor was this woman, maybe a few years older than me, incredibly professional and kind. I was embarrassed explaining what happened, felt like an idiot for injuring myself trying to show off to nobody in a quiet gym at 6 a.m. She made me strip down naked, which was quite awkward since she was kinda hot, and examined me and said it looked like a hernia strain. I was terrified it would require surgery, that I'd lose all my progress, that I'd ruined everything. The doctor told me I'd gotten lucky, but I needed to rest completely for at least 4 weeks. No lifting, nothing strenuous. Light walking at most, but that was it. I was devastated. She could tell. She said something that stuck with me, said fitness was a marathon, not a sprint, and going too hard too fast was how she's seen people got hurt or burned out and quit entirely. So I rested. I couldn't work out, couldn't do the one thing that had been giving me purpose. I fell back into gaming, but it didn't hit the same way anymore. I felt restless, frustrated, trapped. I was eating my healthy meals but felt pointless about it. I fell back a bit, honestly. Started thinking about how I'd been living before wasn't sustainable, but this new obsession with fitness wasn't either. I'd just swapped one for another. About 2 weeks into my forced rest, I was scrolling through Reddit out of boredom and came across a post in my city's subreddit. Someone was organising a casual hiking group, meeting every Saturday morning for beginner-friendly trails, just people who wanted to get outside and socialise. Something clicked. I needed something active but not intense, something social but not forced. I messaged the organiser. On the third weekend, when I was feeling a bit better, I met the group at the trailhead. There were 8 of us, mixed ages and fitness levels. That day's organiser, a woman named Sam who was maybe 40, explained the route and we started walking. It was nice, actually nice. We chatted as we walked, nothing deep at first, just casual conversation about work and hobbies and why we'd joined. The trail was beautiful, about 5 miles round trip. Took us 3 hours because we stopped frequently for me to pause, but also to appreciate views and take photos and just enjoy nature. When we finished, a few people suggested grabbing lunch. We went to this small sandwich shop and kept talking. I learned that Sam was a high school teacher who'd struggled with work-life balance and started the hiking group to force herself to unplug on weekends. There was Tom, an accountant who'd gone through a divorce and was rebuilding his social life. There was Jane, a grad student who said her stress was spiking from spending all her time in libraries and labs. Everyone had their own version of realizing they needed balance. I went back the next Saturday, and the next. Others joined that I hadn't met before. Conversations got deeper. People talked about their lives, their struggles, their wins. Tom mentioned he used to be a hardcore gamer, but realized it was making him more isolated. Jane talked about how she'd been obsessed with academic achievement to the point of having panic attacks. Sam talked about how she'd burned out from teaching and had to relearn how to do things for joy instead of productivity. I told them about my fitness obsession and injury, about how I'd been living on autopilot before that, about how I didn't know where the middle ground was between doing nothing and doing too much. Sam said something I think about constantly now. She said balance wasn't about splitting your time evenly between things. It was about being present in whatever you were doing and making sure you had multiple things that fulfilled different needs. Physical health, mental health, social connection, personal growth, fun. If any one of those took over your entire life, you'd end up miserable. It's been 4 months since I joined the hiking group. I'm back to working out, but reasonably, 3 days a week, moderate intensity, listening to my body. I still eat well, but don't obsess over every macro. I game sometimes, but not every night. I see the hiking group weekly, and we've become actual friends. Tom and I grabbed beers last week just to hang out. Jane invited me to a game night she's hosting next month. Sam's been teaching me about photography during our hikes. The gaming friends I had before, the ones I spent hours with every night, I've drifted from them. Not intentionally, just naturally. I realized most of those relationships were based on convenience and routine, not actual connection. When I talk to the hiking group, I feel energized. When I used to game all night, I'd feel drained. I don't know if I have this figured out yet. Probably not. But I know I'm happier now than I was 8 months ago when I was just going through the motions, and happier than I was 3 months ago when I was obsessed with transformation. I'm just living, trying things, connecting with people, moving my body because it feels good, not because I'm chasing some ideal. That's enough. That's the end of that story. Sometimes, the wake-up call isn't a dramatic betrayal. It's your own life showing you that extremes in either direction aren't the answer. And next, we have a story about a woman who learned to trust her instincts instead of playing it safe. I'm writing this from a place of genuine happiness, which feels weird because I spent the past 3 years being pretty miserable at work and convinced I'd be single forever. This is the story of how taking a chance on someone unexpected changed everything. I'm 29, work in marketing for a mid-sized tech company. I'm good at my job, maybe too good, because my boss figured out she could dump unlimited work on me and I'd get it done. My co-workers weren't much better. I was the youngest person in the office by at least 8 years, the only one with a master's degree, and apparently threatening enough that none of the women wanted to be friendly. The men were either dismissive or, worse, the senior directors would make comments about how I looked, ask about my dating life, offer to take me to dinner to discuss my career development. They were all in their mid-40s, married with kids, and completely inappropriate. I reported it to HR once. Nothing happened, except the comments got more subtle. I was stuck. I needed the job for my resume, couldn't afford to quit without something lined up, but the environment was toxic and isolating. My personal life wasn't better. I didn't know where to meet people outside work. Bars felt depressing and full of guys just looking for hookups. Friends would set me up occasionally, but those always went nowhere. So I downloaded a dating app. Not one of the ones with a reputation for casual encounters, but one that claimed to focus on serious relationships. I spent a week swiping and talking to people, and wanted to delete it immediately. Every conversation turned sexual within a few messages. Guys would send inappropriate photos without asking. One guy asked me to send revealing pictures before we'd even met. Another told me about himself in graphic detail within the first conversation. I was exhausted and disgusted. I was about to delete the whole app when I came across this profile. The guy was 35, a little older than I usually considered, and his photos showed him with a tiny bit of a dad bod, not too overweight, but definitely not gym-obsessed. What caught my attention was his profile description. It was funny and thoughtful, talked about his hobbies, which included hiking, reading, learning about artificial intelligence, and posting about it online, cooking, traveling. Not a single reference to anything physical or sexual, just genuinely interesting stuff. His name was Marcus. He sent me a message, commenting on something in my profile about a book I'd read. We had an actual conversation, about books, about work, about travel. We messaged for 3 days, and he never once said anything inappropriate, never asked for photos, never brought up anything physical, just talked to me like I was a person he was interested in getting to know. It was shocking how refreshing that was. He invited me to meet up. I said yes, but insisted on somewhere public and relatively early, Monday evening at 7. We agreed on a boba tea place near downtown. I was nervous walking there, running through all the ways this could go wrong, reminding myself to trust my instincts and leave if anything felt off. I got there first and waited outside. Then I saw him walking up. I recognized him from his photos, but he looked different, far better. His photos had been a bit older apparently, because he was in much better shape than they showed. Still had a normal body, not intimidatingly muscular, just fit and healthy looking. He was taller than I expected. He smiled when he saw me, and I felt this immediate attraction that caught me off guard. We went inside and ordered. He paid for both, without making it a thing. We sat and talked, and it was so easy. He was funny, asked questions about my life, actually listened to the answers, shared stories about his own experiences. An hour passed, like 10 minutes. When we finished our drinks, he asked if I wanted to walk around a bit, said there was a good ice cream place nearby. I said yes. We got ice cream and kept walking and talking. He pointed out this tiny bookstore that looked like it was about to close for the day. He asked if I liked books, and I mentioned I loved reading but hadn't had much time lately. He suggested we check it out quickly before they closed. Inside was cramped and dusty and absolutely perfect. Shelves crammed with used books, narrow aisles, the smell of old paper. We browsed together and he kept pulling books off shelves to show me, asking if I'd read them, recommending ones he'd loved. I found a few I wanted, and he bought them before I could argue, said it was a pleasure to meet someone who still read physical books. We left the bookstore and kept walking. It was almost 10 p.m. by then, fully dark, the city settling into its evening rhythm. We talked about everything. His work in project management, my terrible boss and inappropriate directors, his interests in AI, and how it was changing everything. My frustration with dating apps, my career ambitions. He told me about his hobbies, showed me photos from recent hikes, talked about this online community he was part of where people discussed new technologies. I found myself completely engaged, not wanting the night to end. Around 11, he said he should probably get me home, that I probably had work in the morning. I did, but I didn't want to go home. I made a decision that I'd normally never make on a first date. I asked if I wanted to come to his place for a bit, maybe watch something or just keep talking. He looked surprised, but said of course, if I was comfortable with that. His apartment was nice, clean but lived in, decorated like an actual adult lived there. We sat on his couch and put on some show neither of us paid attention to. We kept talking, and then we were kissing. And then we were in his bedroom, and the chemistry was intense. I'm not going to go into explicit detail, but it was the kind of connection where everything just worked, where you can't keep your hands off each other, where the physical matched the emotional. The next morning, I woke up in his bed and had this moment of panic. What had I done? This wasn't like me. I barely knew this guy. But then he woke up and smiled at me and offered to make breakfast, and I felt okay. More than okay. We ate together and talked more, and I realized I didn't want this to be a one-time thing. I wanted to see him again. Soon. I left for work, directly from his place. I was distracted all day, kept thinking about him, hoping he'd text, hoping he felt the same way. He texted around noon, saying he'd had an amazing time and asking when he could see me again. I felt this rush of relief and excitement. We've been seeing each other for 3 months now. We're exclusive, officially together, and I'm happier than I've been in years. He's introduced me to hiking, which I love. We go every other weekend. He talks about his AI posts and his online community, and I find it genuinely interesting. He's supportive about my work situation, helped me update my resume, encouraged me to start looking for new jobs. I've had 2 interviews in the past month for positions that would be significant steps up. But here's the thing that's been occupying my mind lately. Marcus is kind of a catch. He's smart, attractive, financially stable, emotionally available, has interesting hobbies, and a full life. I keep thinking he must have other options, other women who are interested. And that makes me want to be the best version of myself, to be someone he'd choose. I've been working on myself differently than before, not obsessing over my appearance, but investing in my own interests and growth. I've been reading more, learning about the stuff he's passionate about, so we can have deeper conversations, working on my own career more seriously. My boss noticed I'm distracted, which is fine because I've also realized I'm worth more than this job. If I'm going to be this person who takes chances and goes after what I want, that includes my career too. Last week, my boss called me into her office to ask what was going on with me. Said I seemed different, less focused on projects. I looked at her, this woman who'd been exploiting my work ethic for years, and said exactly what I was thinking. I told her I'd been carrying a workload meant for multiple people while being paid for one, and that I'd been dealing with inappropriate comments from senior leadership with no HR support. Her face went through several expressions before landing on defensive. She tried to backtrack, said I was overreacting, that she'd always valued my work. I don't think I took it too far, but it was definitely a little tense. I left her office feeling much better, like I'd finally stood up for myself in a way I should have years ago. That evening, I told Marcus about it, and he was so proud of me. Said he knew I was undervalued there, and he couldn't wait to see where I ended up next. The thing about taking a chance on Marcus that first Monday evening is that it taught me I'd been playing everything too safe. Safe job, even though it made me miserable. Safe dating choices that went nowhere. Safe decisions that kept me stuck. When I decided to meet him, to give someone slightly older with a different body type than my usual preferences, a shot to stay out late on a work night, to go home with him, I was choosing something uncertain over something predictable, and it worked out, not because it was guaranteed, but because I was finally willing to risk something to get something better. I don't know if Marcus and I will last forever. 3 months is still new, but I know that being with him has made me braver in other parts of my life too. I'm interviewing for a job next week that would have a decent pay increase and better position. I'm setting boundaries with my current boss. I'm dressing how I want instead of trying to downplay my appearance to avoid comments. I'm living like someone who knows her worth. And honestly, whether this relationship goes the distance or not, I'm grateful for what it's taught me. That taking chances on the unexpected can lead to exactly what you need. That chemistry isn't just physical, it's intellectual and emotional too. That the right person will make you want to be better without making you feel like you're not enough. That sometimes the best things come from saying yes when your instinct is to play it safe. That's the end of that story. Sometimes the betrayal is what you've been doing to yourself by settling for less than you deserve. Our next story involves precious metals, missing coins, and learning to trust your investment strategy even when everyone else thinks you're crazy. Look, I know how this is going to sound. I know precious metals investors have a reputation for being paranoid conspiracy theorists. But hear me out, because this journey has taught me as much about human behavior as it has about investing. I'm 34, work in operations for a logistics company, make all right money but nothing wild. I'm pretty boring financially. I had a savings account that I contributed to automatically and ignored otherwise. I keep most of my savings in the Apple savings account, earning maybe 3.5%. I wasn't irresponsible like I used to be, just not particularly strategic right now. Then I fell into this rabbit hole on X. Someone I followed for tech content had retweeted something about inflation and the dollar losing purchasing power. I clicked through and found this whole community of people discussing alternative stores of value. Precious metals kept coming up, gold and silver. People posting photos of coins, bars, discussing premiums and spot prices and historical trends. These were beautiful. I was absolutely fascinated. I'd never thought about physical precious metals as an investment or way to store savings. Stocks, sure, real estate, obviously, but we all know how that's going right now. But buying actual gold and silver and storing it yourself seemed archaic and at least a decent level of risky. But the more I read, the more interesting it became. There was something appealing about holding a tangible asset, something that had been valuable for thousands of years, something that couldn't be printed infinitely like paper currency, something that continued to be traded over the years, unlike crypto, where I had been burned previously. I started researching, watched YouTube videos, read articles, learned about the difference between numismatic coins, bars, and bullion, about premiums over spot price, about reputable dealers versus Facebook Marketplace, and eBay scams. Gold was trading at around $3,500 per ounce. Silver was at $37 per ounce. I definitely couldn't afford whole gold coins regularly, but fractional coins and some silver seemed doable. I decided I wanted to try this, but I needed to talk to someone first. I have 3 close friends I discuss money with occasionally. I brought it up over dinner one weekend, said I was thinking about buying some gold and silver as a hedge against inflation, and asked what they thought. Jake laughed immediately, said precious metals were for preppers and people who didn't understand modern finance. The stock market had averaged solid returns annually for decades. Why would I put money in something that just sat there, not generating income? He was heavy into tech stocks, had made significant gains over the past 2 years, thought anything else was wasting opportunity. David was more measured, but skeptical, said he didn't know much about precious metals, but it seemed risky, that prices fluctuated a lot, that storage and insurance were concerns. He suggested I just increase my retirement contributions instead. But Tyler, my third friend, surprised me. He said he'd actually been thinking about the same thing. He'd been reading about currency debasement and central bank policies, and was concerned about long-term dollar stability. He thought having some precious metals as insurance made sense, maybe 10 or 20% of savings. He asked if I'd found good dealers and what my strategy was. That conversation with Tyler solidified my decision. Having someone who understood the reasoning made me feel less crazy. We agreed to both start buying and share information about dealers and prices. I set a budget. I'd allocate some money per month to precious metals. Most bullion dealers offered free shipping over $200, so that became my threshold. First month, I bought fractional gold, a quarter-ounce American gold eagle, for about $770 after premium. The coin arrived, and I held them and felt this weird satisfaction. This was real. This was mine. Nobody could inflate it away. Second month, I switched to silver. I bought a 20-coin tube of American silver eagle coins from a reputable online dealer. The package arrived, and the weight was substantial. I handled these with gloves to feel the heft and then put them away safely. Tyler and I would text each other photos of our purchases, tracking spot prices, discussing whether to buy more gold or more silver each month based on the ratio between them. Third month, back to fractional gold. Fourth month, silver again. I was alternating, building both positions slowly. It became this hobby I looked forward to. Checking prices, timing purchases, waiting for deliveries. Tyler was doing the same thing. We'd talk about it like other people talked about their stock portfolios. Then month 4's silver shipment arrived and immediately felt wrong. The package was lighter than it should be. I opened it and counted the coins. I'd ordered 12 one-ounce coins. There were only 8. I counted again. Definitely 8. I checked the order confirmation. Definitely paid for 12. I checked the packing slip inside. It listed 8 coins. Something was very wrong. I didn't panic immediately. Mistakes happen. Maybe they'd split the shipment and the rest was coming separately. I checked the tracking number. Only 1 package. I waited 2 more days in case a second package appeared. Nothing. I had to figure out what happened. 4 ounces of silver at now $43 per ounce was $172. Not a fortune, but not nothing either. I needed to know if this was a dealer mistake, a postal service theft, or something else. I started with the post office. I drove to the city distribution center and asked to speak with the postmaster. Explained the situation, showed him my tracking information. He pulled up the package GPS details on his computer. The package had been scanned at every point, showed delivered to my address, consistent throughout. He said if 4 coins were missing, it happened before the package entered the postal system, not during transit. That was actually a relief. USPS theft was my biggest worry, because that would be a pain to recover. I thanked him and left. Next I called the bullion dealer. I'd used this company before without issues. They had excellent reviews, been in business for decades, were considered reputable in the industry. I explained the situation to their customer service rep, told them I'd ordered 12 coins, received 8, checked with USPS, and was told the weight was consistent throughout, so the discrepancy happened on their end. The rep was professional and apologetic, said this was unusual, that they weigh every package before shipping and had quality control checks, but he'd open an internal investigation. He asked me to email photos of what I received and the packing slip. I did immediately. 3 days later, a different rep called me back. She explained they'd reviewed their internal processes and found the error. When my order was being fulfilled, someone had pulled 8 coins from inventory instead of 12, but the packing slip had been generated correctly, showing 12. When they weighed the package, they'd weighed it against the wrong order specification. It was human error compounded by a process failure. She apologized and said they'd ship the remaining 4 coins immediately with expedited shipping at no charge. I was honestly impressed. They owned the mistake, explained exactly what happened, made it right quickly. The replacement package arrived 2 days later with all 4. I told Tyler about the whole ordeal. He said he'd had similar paranoia about shipments going missing, but hadn't actually experienced it. We laughed about how we'd both turned into people who tracked precious metal prices daily and worried about coin deliveries. But then something interesting happened. Recently, spot prices had moved significantly. Gold was now at $4,000 per ounce. Silver had jumped to $50 per ounce. I pulled up my spreadsheet where I'd been tracking my purchases. My fractional gold that I'd bought at $3,500 per ounce was now worth $4,000. My silver bought at $37 was now worth $50. I'd invested about a couple $1,000 and it was now worth roughly $2,500 already. I mentioned this to Jake and David the next time we all got together. Jake immediately dismissed it, said my sample size was too small, that his tech stocks had returned 40% over the same period and he could sell them with a swipe on Robinhood. David said good for me, but he was sticking with his strategy. I felt a little deflated hearing Jake's returns. 40% versus my roughly 25%. Maybe I was missing out. Tyler texted me that evening, after I'd mentioned feeling like maybe I should pivot back to stocks. He said something smart. He said we hadn't gotten into precious metals to compete with stock market returns. We'd gotten into it as insurance, as a hedge, as something uncorrelated with traditional markets. The gains were a bonus. The point was preservation of purchasing power and having something tangible that couldn't be manipulated. He was right, but I still felt that fear of missing out. 4 days later, Jake texted the group in a panic with the news. The stock market had taken a massive dive, not a correction, nearly everything was red. Some trade war news had sent everything tumbling. He'd lost 35% in a single day, nearly all his gains from the past year gone. He was asking us what we thought he should do. Should he sell? Should he hold? Was this going to keep dropping? I checked gold and silver prices. Gold had dipped slightly to $3,970. Silver dropped to 48.5, but nothing like the stock market's collapse. My precious metals investment had barely moved. Jake had gone from up 40% to maybe 5% at best. I told Jake I didn't know what he should do, that I wasn't a Wall Street quant, but that the volatility was exactly why I'd wanted some assets outside the traditional market. He was frustrated, and I felt bad for him. Tyler texted me that same day, said he'd watched his tech stocks drop too but wasn't worried because his precious metals position was stable. He said we should keep buying monthly like we'd planned. I agreed. We're 6 months into this now. Gold is pushing above $4,000 per ounce, silver fighting 51. My stack has grown to about $3,000 in value from $2,000 invested. Tyler's is similar. We're both up around 40% now. Jake's stocks have slightly recovered, but he's still basically flat for the year after that crash. David's retirement account probably grew steadily. The thing is, I don't feel smug about being right or Jake being wrong. I learned something through this whole experience. Everyone has different goals, different risk tolerances, different strategies. Jake wants maximum growth and is willing to accept volatility. David wants steady, hands-off, long-term growth. Tyler and I want diversification and tangible assets we can hold. None of these strategies are wrong, they're just different. But I also learned that doing something unconventional doesn't mean you're wrong. Everyone thought I was crazy when I started buying gold and silver. Maybe not crazy, but misguided, old-fashioned, missing out on better opportunities. And maybe in a continuous bull market I would be missing out. But markets don't go up forever, and having something that holds value when everything else is falling apart brings a peace of mind I didn't know I was missing. I'm going to keep buying. Tyler too. We've both decided to increase our monthly allocation slightly. And if gold and silver go back down, fine. We'll buy more at lower prices. If they keep going up, fine. We'll buy less with the same dollar amount but keep stacking. The point isn't timing the market. It's consistently building a position in something we believe has lasting value. That's the end of that story. Sometimes the betrayal is trusting conventional wisdom without considering if it aligns with your own goals and values. Our next story is about stolen lunches, wrong assumptions, and how quick we are to judge people unfairly. I have to share this because I feel like an absolute jerk, and maybe writing it out will help me process how badly I misjudged someone. This is about workplace lunch theft, but it's really about my own biases and assumptions. I'm 32, work at a marketing firm, pretty standard office environment. We have a communal kitchen with a full-size refrigerator that everyone uses. I'm one of those people who meal preps on Sundays, likes to eat healthy, spends decent money on quality ingredients from places like Costco and Whole Foods. I'd make these nice balanced lunches in glass containers, label them, store them in the fridge. About 2 months ago, I started noticing something weird. My lunches were disappearing. Not completely, just portions of them. I'd pack a full meal, come to grab it at lunchtime, and half would be gone. At first I thought maybe I'd miscalculated portions when prepping, but it kept happening. Consistently, someone was eating my food. I was annoyed, but didn't want to make a scene. I started paying more attention to who was in the kitchen when, trying to spot patterns, that's when I noticed something. There was this newer woman in the office, Lisa, who'd been hired about 3 months prior. She worked in operations, not my department, but our floors shared the kitchen. She was quiet, kept to herself, dressed kind of frumpy in a way that stood out in our office, where most people dressed business casual with some fashion sense. Her clothes seemed dated, like she shopped at thrift stores or hadn't updated her wardrobe since the early 2000s. The other women in my department had invited Lisa to join us for lunch outings a couple times. She'd declined both times, said she had to head home during lunch but maybe next time. It seemed odd. Why go home for lunch instead of eating with colleagues or bringing something unless she couldn't afford to go out with us and was embarrassed? Unless she was stealing food from the fridge because she was struggling financially. That would explain the frumpy clothes too. I convinced myself Lisa was the lunch thief. The timeline matched. The theft started. She declined lunch invitations, probably because she felt guilty. She dressed like someone who was barely scraping by. It all made sense. I didn't want to confront her directly or poison my food like I'd heard about in other lunch theft stories. That seemed extreme and potentially dangerous. I also didn't want to report her to HR if she was stealing out of genuine need. That felt cruel. But I wanted to catch her in the act, confirm my suspicion, maybe talk to her privately about it. I started taking bathroom breaks more frequently, using them as excuses to walk past the kitchen and peek in. I'd take the long route to the far bathroom that had a clear sightline to the kitchen entrance. For a week, nothing. Then, one afternoon, around 1 p.m, I saw someone in the kitchen, but it wasn't Lisa. It was a contractor, a guy I'd seen around occasionally, usually in work clothes like he'd been doing physical labor. He was standing at the counter, eating something from a glass container that looked exactly like mine. I walked in immediately. He looked up, mid-bite, and his face registered surprise, then confusion. I didn't yell, didn't want to cause a scene, but I said firmly that I was pretty sure he was eating my lunch. He swallowed, looked down at the container, looked back at me, and his expression shifted to horrified embarrassment. He started apologizing immediately, pulled out his wallet, asked how much the lunch cost, said he'd pay me back right now. He explained that he was a contractor hired to help with some facility upgrades, loading trailers, and moving equipment, usually worked through lunch. Someone at the reception desk had told him when he started that he could grab anything he needed from the kitchen, that the company provided snacks and drinks for contractors working on site. He thought the small glass containers were part of that. They were about the size of the yogurts and juices in there. He'd been grabbing one every few days, thought they were some kind of meal prep snacks the company provided. He genuinely had no idea they were someone's personal lunch. I felt like an idiot. The containers were on the smaller side because I portion controlled. To someone expecting a full lunch, they'd look like a snack. And he'd probably been told he could take water, juice, yogurt, whatever he needed. Of course, he thought the sealed containers were fair game. I told him it was fine, a misunderstanding, no need for money. He insisted, pulled out a $20 bill, said he would get some more later but wanted to make it right. I tried to refuse, but he was genuinely distressed about it. I finally accepted it, thanked him, said it really wasn't a big deal. The next day, there was a handwritten note on my desk from the contractor apologizing again, saying he'd clarified with management about what he was allowed to take and felt terrible about the confusion. He'd included a $50 gift card to Whole Foods on top of the cash he'd already given me. I felt ridiculous. This guy, who was doing manual labor and probably making less than anyone in my office, had given me $70 for maybe $30 worth of food he'd taken by accident. I went to find him to return the gift card, but he'd already finished his work and left the building. I asked reception about him, and they confirmed the miscommunication, said they'd clarified the kitchen policy with all contractors to prevent future issues. That evening, my department went out to dinner, like we did occasionally. I was telling them about the lunch thief situation, how it turned out to be a complete misunderstanding with a contractor. I deliberately left out the part about assuming it was Lisa. But as I talked, I realized how close I'd come to accusing her, maybe to her face, maybe to HR, based on nothing but her appearance and the fact that she kept to herself. I felt awful. I decided I needed to make it right somehow. The next time my department organized a lunch outing, I made sure to personally invite Lisa. I told her it would be my treat, that I'd been wanting to get to know her better and hoped she could make it this time. She looked surprised, but agreed. We went to this casual restaurant, about 6 of us total. Lisa was quiet at first, but gradually opened up. Turned out she was incredibly interesting. She'd moved here from across the country for this job, didn't know anyone in the city yet, had been shy about inserting herself into established friend groups. The reason she declined lunch invitations before wasn't financial. She'd been going home to let her dog out during her lunch break because she lived close to the office. The dog had since adjusted to a longer schedule, so she didn't need to do that anymore. Her clothes, which I'd judged as frumpy and dated, were vintage pieces she collected from estate sales and thrift stores. She was into sustainable fashion, didn't want to support fast fashion, had a whole Instagram dedicated to styling vintage finds. When she showed us her account, it was actually really cool. She had this unique aesthetic that I'd completely misread as dowdy. She just didn't dress corporate, which in hindsight was kind of refreshing in an office where everyone looked the same. She was funny, smart, interesting to talk to. We all agreed afterward that we should have tried harder to include her sooner. Lisa and I have become actual friends since then. She comes to most of our lunch outings now, sometimes suggests places she's discovered. I told her recently about assuming the lunch thief was a new co-worker, and almost confronting them, didn't mention it was her I'd suspected, and she laughed and said, "People always assume new people are responsible when weird stuff happens." I think about that a lot, how quickly I constructed a narrative about Lisa based on surface-level observations and assumptions. How close I came to making a horrible accusation that could have damaged her reputation in the office and made her feel unwelcome. How I let my own biases about appearance and social behavior cloud my judgment. The contractor was innocent. Lisa was innocent. The only person who did anything wrong was me, in my head, creating a false story about someone I didn't know. The gift card money, by the way, I spent on snacks and drinks that I left in the communal kitchen for anyone to take. Felt like the right thing to do with it. And I made sure to label my lunches more clearly going forward with my name and the date, not that it matters now that the miscommunication has been fixed. But mostly, I learned to check my assumptions about people before I let them turn into convictions. That's the end of that story. Sometimes, the betrayal isn't what someone did to you, it's what you almost did to someone else, based on nothing but prejudice. Our next story is about something that probably sounds familiar to anyone who's ever rented an apartment, but trust me, this goes way beyond normal landlord frustrations. So I moved into this apartment about 2 years ago. Nothing fancy, just a standard 1-bedroom in a decent neighbourhood, but the rent was reasonable and it was close to work. The landlord seemed fine during the showing, a bit older guy who owned a few properties in the area. He gave me the usual spiel about how he was responsive and took care of his tenants. I should have known better than to take that at face value. The problem started maybe 3 months in. The dishwasher started making this grinding noise every time I ran it, and by the 4th month, it just stopped working entirely. I'm not talking about a minor inconvenience here. This thing wouldn't drain, wouldn't clean, nothing. I sent my landlord an email right away, very polite, just explaining the situation and asking when someone could come look at it. He replied 4 days later saying he'd get someone out there soon. Soon turned into 2 weeks, then 3. I sent follow-up emails. I called twice, every time same response. He'd get to it, he was working on scheduling someone. It was hard to find a good repair person. Meanwhile, I'm hand-washing every single dish like I'm living in the 1800s. After a full month of this, I finally sent him a message saying that the dishwasher was clearly broken beyond repair and needed to be replaced entirely. He took 5 days to respond to that one, saying he wanted to have someone look at it first before making any decisions about replacement. Another 2 weeks went by. The repair guy finally showed up, spent maybe 15 minutes looking at it, and told me straight up that the motor was completely shot and it would cost more to repair than to just buy a new one. I passed this information along to my landlord immediately. His response? He'd think about it and get back to me. That was in June. I didn't get a new dishwasher until September. 3 months of fighting for something that should have been a basic landlord responsibility. But wait, it gets better. The apartment was right next to a busy road, and I mean busy. Trucks at all hours, motorcycles revving their engines at 2 a.m, constant traffic noise. I knew about the road when I moved in, but I figured I'd get used to it. I didn't. 2 years of barely sleeping, of having to keep my windows closed even in summer, of hearing every single vehicle that passed by. I was exhausted all the time, and my quality of life was genuinely suffering. So, when my lease renewal notice came around in February of this year, I wasn't surprised to see that rent was going up. I was expecting maybe $50, maybe $75 more a month. That would have been annoying but manageable. The notice said my new rent would be $240 more per month. Not $50, not $100, $240. For the same apartment, with the same broken dishwasher situation from months before, the same road noise, the same everything. I was paying $1,100 a month, and he wanted to bump it to $1,340. I didn't even think about it. I sent him an email that same day saying I wouldn't be renewing and would be moving out at the end of my lease in May. He responded within an hour this time, suddenly very communicative, asking if there was anything he could do to make me stay. Maybe we could negotiate on the rent increase. I told him, no thanks, I'd already made my decision. The next few weeks were spent apartment hunting, which is its own special kind of hell. I must have looked at 20 different places. Too expensive, too small, too far from work, sketchy neighborhoods, you name it. But then I found this perfect spot. Quieter street, better neighborhood, actually cheaper than what I was currently paying, and the landlord seemed way more professional. The only catch was that they needed someone to move in by April 15th, which was about 6 weeks before my current lease ended. I thought about it for maybe a day before deciding it was worth it. I'd rather pay rent at both places for a few weeks than lose out on this new apartment. I told my current landlord about the situation, explained that I'd be moving out in mid-April instead of the end of May, and asked about prorating the last month's rent since I'd be leaving early. He said that was fine, we'd figure it out. I moved everything out over a weekend in mid-April, cleaned the place top to bottom. I'm talking hands and knees scrubbing the bathroom, wiping down every surface, vacuuming every corner. I wanted this place spotless, so there would be 0 issues with getting my security deposit back. I'd lived there for 2 years and had taken decent care of everything. Normal wear and tear, sure, but nothing crazy. I took probably 100 photos of the empty apartment from every angle, just to have documentation. 2 weeks after I moved out, I got an email from my landlord with an itemized list of deductions from my security deposit. My security deposit was $1,500. His list of deductions totaled $2,300, meaning he was claiming I owed him $800 on top of keeping my entire deposit. The list was insane. He was charging me $600 for repainting the entire apartment, $300 for deep cleaning, $200 for carpet replacement in the bedroom, $150 for minor repairs to kitchen cabinets, and a bunch of smaller charges that added up to the rest. I read through this email probably 5 times, trying to understand what he was thinking. The paint? The walls had a few small scuff marks, the kind that happen when you live somewhere for 2 years. You move furniture, you bump into things, it happens. That's literally the definition of normal wear and tear. The cleaning? I'd spent an entire day cleaning that place. It was cleaner when I left than when I moved in. The carpet? There were no stains, no damage, nothing. It was just slightly worn from 2 years of use, which again, normal wear and tear. The cabinet repairs? I had no idea what he was even talking about. The cabinets were fine. I was furious, but I tried to stay calm. I responded to his email very professionally, laying out why each charge was unreasonable and citing the state laws about what landlords can and cannot charge for. I attached my photos showing the condition of the apartment. I reminded him that wear and tear from normal living is expected and cannot be charged to the tenant. I even pulled up the original condition report from when I moved in, which noted that the paint was already worn in several places and the carpet was old. He responded 2 days later, completely ignoring everything I'd said, just restating that these were legitimate charges and I needed to pay the $800 within 30 days or he'd send it to collections. At this point, I decided I needed to take a different approach. I'd heard about these AI tools that could help with legal correspondence, so I logged into Grok and spent about an hour putting together a much more formal letter. The AI helped me structure it properly, cite the right legal codes, make it sound professional but firm. The letter essentially said that his charges violated state tenant law, that normal wear and tear cannot be charged to tenants, that I had documentation proving the condition of the apartment, and that if he didn't return my full security deposit within 2 weeks, I'd be pursuing legal action. I sent that letter via certified mail, so I'd have proof he received it. 3 days after he got it, he sent me another email. This time, he'd removed the painting and carpet charges, but was still trying to hit me with the cleaning fee and the cabinet repairs. The new total he claimed I owed was $450, meaning he'd keep my full deposit and I'd still owe him. Progress, I guess, but still completely unacceptable. I went back to my lease, read through every single line of it, and that's when I found something interesting. When I'd moved in, I'd paid first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. The last month's rent was supposed to cover my final month of living there. I'd been paying rent every month for 2 years, including my final month in April before I left. So by my calculation, I had a full month's rent sitting there that he owed me, on top of my security deposit. I sent him an email pointing this out, along with copies of all my rent payment receipts. I asked him to confirm that he had received last month's rent when I moved in, and to explain what had happened to that money. Radio silence. A week went by, with no response. I sent a follow-up. Nothing. Another week passed. That's when I called my friend Marcus, who'd just passed the bar exam a few months ago. Marcus and I went to college together and stayed close over the years. He wasn't officially practicing yet, but he knew the law and he was eager to help. I explained the entire situation to him over drinks one night, showed him all the emails, the photos, the lease, everything. Marcus was immediately fired up about it. He said this was a textbook case of a landlord trying to screw over a tenant and hoping they wouldn't fight back. He offered to write a letter on his new law firm's letterhead, making it clear that I had legal representation and wasn't going to back down. The letter Marcus sent was a thing of beauty. It outlined every single violation, cited multiple state statutes, referenced case law about security deposit disputes, and made it very clear that if my landlord didn't return my full security deposit, plus my last month's rent within 10 days, we'd be filing a lawsuit. Not just for the money he owed me, but for the maximum penalties allowed under state law, which included the possibility of him owing me up to 3 times the amount wrongfully withheld, plus my attorney fees. My landlord responded within 24 hours. Suddenly, he was very apologetic. There had been a misunderstanding about the charges. He'd reviewed his records and found that, yes, I had paid last month's rent. He'd miscalculated the wear and tear situation. He was willing to return my full security deposit. I was thrilled. I called Marcus immediately to tell him the good news. But then Marcus said something that made me pause. He asked if I wanted to pursue a lawsuit anyway. According to him, my landlord had clearly acted in bad faith. The attempts to charge me for normal wear and tear, the refusal to acknowledge the last month's rent I'd paid, the threats to send me to collections, all of that could potentially be grounds for a lawsuit seeking damages. I'll be honest, the idea was tempting. This guy had made my life miserable with the dishwasher situation, was trying to rip me off on the way out, and I wanted him to face some real consequences. But Marcus immediately tempered my expectations. He explained that while we might have a case, it wasn't a slam dunk. We'd need to prove that his actions were willfully malicious rather than just negligent or incompetent. The amount we'd likely recover, even if we won, probably wouldn't be life-changing money after legal fees and the time investment. He also pointed out that litigation is expensive, time-consuming, and stressful. Even with him giving me a discounted rate as a friend, it could drag on for months. The landlord would probably lawyer up too, and then it becomes a war of attrition. Was I prepared for that? I thought about it for a few days. Part of me really wanted to make this guy pay for being such a terrible landlord, but the practical side of me recognized that I'd already won the important battle. I was getting my deposit back, plus the last month's rent. That was almost $3,000 total. If I pushed for a lawsuit and lost, I'd be out legal fees with nothing to show for it. If I won, I might get some additional penalties, but at what cost to my time and mental energy? In the end, I decided to take the money and move on. My landlord sent me a check for the full amount within a week. I deposited it, watched it clear, and felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Was I still angry about the whole situation? Absolutely. But I'd learned some valuable lessons about documentation, tenant rights, and when to get legal help. Marcus and I joke about it now. He says it was good practice for him, getting to write threatening legal letters on real cases. I told him that next time I have a landlord problem, I'm calling him immediately instead of waiting months to get help. The funny thing is, my new apartment is amazing. The landlord is responsive, professional, and treats the property like he actually cares about it. When my shower started dripping last month, he had a plumber there within 2 days. 2 days! I almost cried from the shock of having a landlord who actually does his job. It really makes you realize how much we normalize dysfunction in these rental situations. Looking back at the whole mess, I think the key was documentation and persistence. If I hadn't taken those photos, kept every email, saved every receipt, I would have had a much harder time fighting back. And if I hadn't been willing to get a lawyer involved, even just for a strongly worded letter, my landlord probably would have kept stonewalling me. So, to anyone reading this who's dealing with a difficult landlord, my advice is simple. Document everything. Know your rights under state tenant law. Don't be afraid to push back on unreasonable charges. And if you need to, get legal help. Sometimes, just the threat of a lawsuit is enough to make people suddenly become reasonable. I'm settled into my new place now, actually sleeping through the night without road noise, using a dishwasher that works, and feeling pretty good about standing up for myself. Sometimes the system works if you're willing to fight for it. That's the end of that story. It's wild how much energy landlords will put into trying to steal from tenants instead of just being decent human beings. But hey, at least this one ended with the tenant actually getting their money back, which unfortunately isn't always how these situations go. This next one is going to sound absolutely desperate, and honestly it was. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm also not sure I had much choice given the situation I was in. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in marketing 3 years ago. Good school, decent grades, nothing exceptional, but nothing terrible either. I thought I'd have a job lined up within a couple months. I was wrong, so incredibly wrong. The job market was brutal. I'm talking hundreds of applications, maybe 20 interviews over the course of 8 months, and 0 offers. Every entry-level position wanted 3 to 5 years of experience. Every company wanted you to already have done the exact job they were hiring for. It was this impossible catch-22 where you needed experience to get experience. My student loans went into repayment. My savings evaporated. I was living with my parents, working part-time at a coffee shop, making barely enough to cover my loan payments and phone bill. I felt like a complete failure. Everyone from my graduating class seemed to be moving forward with their lives while I was stuck in this purgatory. After about 10 months of getting nowhere, I started noticing something. The people who were getting interviews and job offers all seemed to have these perfect resumes. Not just good, but perfect. Multiple internships, leadership positions, study abroad programs, impressive achievements. I'd look at job postings and see hundreds of applicants within the first day. How was anyone supposed to stand out in that ocean? That's when I learned about AI tools that could help with resumes and cover letters. Nothing wrong with that. Everyone uses those now. But as I dove deeper into these tools, I started seeing people talking about other uses. More creative uses. Some people were using AI to embellish their experience, to make their roles sound more impressive, to add details that made them seem more qualified. And then I saw someone mention using AI to create entire documents, certifications, recommendation letters, even degree verifications. They weren't suggesting forgery of official documents from real institutions, more like creating supporting materials that looked professional. The person claimed they'd landed a great job this way and never had any issues. I told myself I'd never do something like that. But then another 3 months went by, another 100 applications, another dozen rejections. My dad started making comments about maybe I should consider trade school, maybe college wasn't worth the investment. My mom kept sending me job listings for retail management positions. I was drowning and desperate. So I did it. I used one of these AI tools to create a certification in digital marketing analytics. It looked completely legitimate. Professional layout, official sounding language, even a fake credential number. I added it to my resume under my certification section. I told myself it wasn't that big of a deal, that I knew the material anyway, that this was just helping me get past the initial screening. Within 2 weeks, I got 3 interview requests. 3, after over a year of mostly silence. The difference was immediate and obvious. Having that certification on my resume made me stand out. It showed specialization. It checked a box that apparently a lot of these companies were looking for. I interviewed at all 3 companies. 2 of them barely asked about the certification at all. The third company, a mid-sized marketing agency, asked me to explain some concepts related to it. Thankfully, I'd actually spent time learning the material so I could talk about it competently. I wasn't lying about my knowledge, just about having formal certification of that knowledge. They offered me the job, $48,000 a year, full benefits, room for growth. I accepted immediately. I started a month later. That was 14 months ago. Here's the thing. I'm actually good at this job. Really good. I work hard. I deliver quality results. I get along well with my team. My boss has praised my work multiple times. I've taken on additional responsibilities. I got a small raise after my 6-month review. By all objective measures, I'm a valued employee who contributes meaningfully to the company. But I live in constant fear. Every day, I wonder if this is the day someone decides to verify my certifications. Every time HR sends out a company-wide email, My heart races thinking it might be about background checks or credential verification. Every time my boss calls me into his office, I think this is it. I'm about to be fired and possibly face legal consequences. I've researched what could happen if they found out. Best case scenario, I just get fired. Worst case, they could pursue fraud charges, sue for any salary paid to me under false pretenses, blacklist me in the industry. I've had nightmares about it. Literal nightmares, where I'm sitting in a courtroom trying to explain why I fabricated a certification. The rational part of my brain knows that the longer I work here without issues, the less likely it is that anyone will go back and verify that specific certification. Most background checks happen before hiring, not after you've been there over a year. But the anxious part of my brain, which is pretty much running the show these days, keeps telling me I'm living on borrowed time. What makes it worse is that I genuinely like my job and my co-workers. I've made friends here. I grab lunch with some of my team members regularly. We do happy hours. I got invited to my boss's birthday party last month. These are good people, and I'm lying to them every single day just by being here under false pretenses. I've thought about coming clean, maybe going to HR, explaining the situation, offering to get the actual certification now that I have some income. But I can't imagine any scenario where that conversation ends well for me. Companies don't reward honesty about fraud. They'd fire me immediately and probably make an example out of me to deter others. So instead, I've been secretly working on actually getting the certification for real. There are legitimate online programs that offer it. They just cost about $1,500 and take 6 months to complete. I enrolled 3 months ago, and I'm about halfway through. My plan is to actually earn the certification, then quietly update my resume and credentials. Maybe that will make me feel less like a fraud. But even if I get the real certification, that doesn't change the fact that I got this job based on a lie. It doesn't erase the forgery. I still committed fraud to get here, even if I'm retroactively making it true. The other thing that bothers me is the precedent this sets in my own mind. I lied, and it worked out well for me, at least so far. Does that mean I'm more likely to lie again in the future? If I'm ever in another desperate situation, will I convince myself that bending the rules is acceptable because it worked before? I don't want to be the kind of person who thinks ethics are optional when things get tough. I've also started wondering how many other people do this. When I look around the office at my co-workers, how many of them embellish their credentials to get here? Is everyone just pretending to be more qualified than they actually are? Or am I one of the few people who actually crossed this line? My parents think I just finally got lucky with a company that gave me a chance. They're so proud of me for finally getting a real job and starting my career. They have no idea that their son is technically a fraud. My friends from college think I hustled hard and eventually found the right fit. Nobody knows the truth except me. I've been thinking about eventually moving to a different company in another year or two, build up some real experience here, then leverage that into a better position somewhere else. But the thought of going through another background check terrifies me. What if the next company is more thorough? What if they actually call and try to verify every certification on my resume? The smart thing to do would probably be to just remove the fake certification from my resume going forward and rely on my actual work experience. But then I'd have to explain why it was on my resume when I was hired here but isn't on future resumes. That might raise questions too. I've also realized that this kind of fraud is probably more common than anyone wants to admit. The barriers to entry for good jobs have become so absurd that people feel forced to game the system just to get a fair shot. Does that make it right? No. But it does make it understandable. When the system is broken, people find workarounds. Someone on a forum I read put it this way: if companies are using AI to screen and reject hundreds of qualified candidates based on arbitrary keyword matching, is it really that wrong for candidates to use AI to make sure they get past those screens? It's fighting automation with automation. I'm not sure I buy that justification, but I understand the logic. What I've learned from this whole experience is that I need to become undeniably good at my actual job, not just competent, but exceptional. Because if my credentials ever come into question, the only thing that might save me is being valuable enough that the company doesn't want to lose me. Maybe if they discover the truth after I've been here for 3 years and become essential to key clients, they'll just quietly tell me to get the real certification and never speak of it again. Or maybe that's just wishful thinking, and I'll eventually face consequences for what I did. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that this was supposed to solve my problems and give me peace of mind. But instead, I've traded unemployment anxiety for fraud discovery anxiety. I'm not sure that's actually an improvement. I've thought about seeing a therapist to talk through this guilt and anxiety, but I'm terrified to tell anyone the truth out loud. What if therapists are mandatory reporters for this kind of thing? What if there's some licensing board issue? I know that's probably paranoid, but my paranoia is in overdrive these days. Part of me wishes I could go back and make a different choice. Find some other way to break into the industry. Maybe take an unpaid internship. Maybe go back to school for a master's degree. Maybe network more aggressively. But I can't undo what I did. I can only figure out how to live with it going forward. The plan right now is to finish getting the real certification, continue doing excellent work, and start building enough genuine experience that the fake certification becomes less relevant over time. In a few years, I can let it quietly drop off my resume and rely purely on my work history. The fake certification will just become this early career embellishment that nobody cares about anymore, because my actual accomplishments speak for themselves. That's the hope, anyway. The reality is, I might be one background check away from losing everything I've built, and maybe that's what I deserve for lying my way into this position. Or maybe I'm being too hard on myself, and everyone bends the rules sometimes to get ahead in an unfair system. I honestly don't know anymore. What I do know is that I'm working harder than anyone else on my team because I feel like I have to prove I deserve to be here. Maybe that's the silver lining. My fraud made me a better employee because I'm trying to earn my place retroactively. That's the end of that story. This is the kind of thing that happens when the job market becomes impossible and people get desperate. Not saying it's right, just saying, I understand how someone gets there. The anxiety of living with that secret, though, that sounds absolutely exhausting. Our next story involves social media, which, as we all know, is both a blessing and a curse depending on the day. I started my TikTok account about 3 years ago. Nothing serious at first, just posting videos of recipes I was making and some home organization content. I've always loved cooking and decorating, so it was a fun, creative outlet after work. I had maybe 200 followers for the first 6 months, and that was fine. I wasn't doing it for fame, just for fun. But then, one of my videos went viral. It was this simple recipe for a weeknight pasta dish. Nothing revolutionary, but apparently, I hit the algorithm just right. That video got 2 million views. Suddenly, I had 10,000 followers. Then, 20,000. Within a month, I was at 50,000. I started posting more consistently, really trying to figure out what my audience wanted. More recipes, more home decor tips, some lifestyle content mixed in. My follower count kept growing. By the end of that first year, I had 250,000 followers across TikTok and Instagram combined. That's when the brand deal emails started coming in. Small stuff at first. A kitchen gadget company would send me free products to feature in a video. A home goods store wanted me to promote their sale. The payments were modest, maybe $100 or $200 per post, but it was real money for doing something I already enjoyed. I kept my full-time job because I'm not delusional. I knew that social media could disappear overnight, and I needed stable income, but the extra money from brand deals was significant. I was making an additional $1,000 to $1,500 a month, sometimes more. I started putting it all into a savings account, thinking maybe in a few years I could afford a down payment on a house. By the second year, I'd grown to 400,000 followers. The brand deals got bigger and more frequent. I was making almost as much from social media as I was from my regular job. I started fantasizing about maybe doing content creation full-time someday, really building this into a sustainable career. That's when I got the email that changed everything. It was from a company called Global Content Partners. They said they worked with creators to license their content for international markets. Basically, they'd take my videos and redistribute them on platforms in Europe, Asia, and South America, and I'd get a percentage of the revenue. According to their email, creators typically made an additional $2,000 to $5,000 per month through their program. $5,000 a month was life-changing money. That would let me max out my house savings while still having money for investing and retirement. I could potentially go full-time with content creation within a year if this worked out. The email said they needed to verify my analytics from all my social media accounts to determine my earning potential in their program. They provided a link to their verification portal where I could securely connect my accounts. The website looked professional. Clean design, official-sounding language, testimonials from other creators I'd never heard of, but that seemed legitimate. I clicked the link. The page asked me to enter my TikTok username and password to verify my analytics. Then the same for Instagram and Facebook. The site said this was a secure connection, and they would only have read access to my data. They wouldn't be able to post or make changes to my accounts. I hesitated for maybe 10 seconds before entering my information. In hindsight, those 10 seconds of hesitation were my instincts screaming at me that something was wrong. But I ignored them because I was too focused on the potential money. I entered my credentials for all 3 platforms and clicked submit. The page loaded for a minute, then showed me a message saying my accounts had been successfully verified and someone from their team would reach out within 48 hours to discuss my earning potential. I felt excited. This could be the breakthrough that took my content creation to the next level. I went about my day, posted a new recipe video, responded to some comments, completely oblivious to what I'd just done. The next morning, I woke up to absolute chaos. I had texts from 3 different friends asking what was wrong with my TikTok. I opened the app and immediately saw that someone had posted a video from my account that definitely wasn't me. It was some spam link about cryptocurrency. Then another video, this one promoting some sketchy weight loss supplement, and another one about an investment scheme. My heart dropped into my stomach. I tried to delete the videos but got an error message. I tried to change my password, but it said my current password was incorrect. Someone had locked me out of my own account. I checked Instagram next. Same thing. Multiple spam posts, my bio had been changed to include some weird links, and I couldn't access my account. Facebook was even worse. They'd posted to all my groups, messaged my friends, changed my profile information. My entire online presence had been hijacked. I immediately reported everything to each platform: TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. I filled out the account recovery forms, provided photo identification, answered security questions. The automated responses said they'd look into it and get back to me within a few business days. A few business days? My accounts were currently posting scam content to hundreds of thousands of people. Every hour that went by was more damage to my reputation and potentially more people being scammed. I needed my accounts back immediately. I spent the entire day trying to reach actual human beings at these companies. TikTok and Instagram were nearly impossible. There's no customer service phone number, no direct email, nothing. Just automated help forms and community forums. Facebook had a support option, but it kept directing me back to automated help articles. Meanwhile, the scam posts kept coming. My followers were commenting things like, "Is your account hacked?" and "This doesn't seem like you," and reporting these posts. Some people were unfollowing. I watched my follower count start to drop in real time. I finally got through to someone at TikTok through their creator support line since I was monetized on the platform. The representative confirmed that my account had been compromised and they were working on securing it. They couldn't give me a timeline for when I'd regain access, but assured me they'd removed the fraudulent posts and suspended posting capabilities on my account until it was secured. Instagram took another 2 days before I heard anything. They sent me an email with a link to verify my identity and reset my password. I went through the process and finally got back into my account. The damage was extensive. I'd lost about 15,000 followers. My engagement had tanked because the algorithm had been confused by all the spam content. Several brands had emailed me saying they were pausing our partnerships due to the account issues. But Facebook was a nightmare that lasted 3 weeks. Every time I tried to recover my account, I got stuck in an automated loop. I'd submit my ID, answer questions, prove I was the rightful owner, and then get a message saying they'd review my case. Days would go by with no response. I'd start the process over again. Same result. I researched and found out that this is incredibly common. Smaller creators have almost no support from Facebook. Unless you're a massive influencer or paying for ads, you're basically on your own with their automated systems. People lose accounts all the time and never get them back. I was panicking. My Facebook page had 80,000 followers. I'd built that community over years. I had brand partnerships that specifically required Facebook posting. I couldn't just lose that account. After 2 weeks of getting nowhere with Facebook's automated systems, I found a forum where someone explained that the only way they got their account back was by basically flooding Facebook with recovery requests until a real person finally reviewed their case. So that's what I did. I submitted recovery requests multiple times a day from different devices using different browsers. I reported the account as hacked through every possible channel. Finally, after 3 weeks of this, I got an email from what appeared to be an actual human at Facebook. They acknowledged my account had been compromised, apologized for the delay, and sent me a direct link to reset my password and regain control. The relief I felt was indescribable. But the damage was done. I'd lost followers across all platforms. My engagement rates were depressed. Several brand deals had fallen through. The scam posts had damaged my credibility. Some people thought I'd intentionally promoted those products and lost trust in me. I spent weeks posting apology videos, explaining what happened, trying to rebuild trust with my audience. The financial impact was significant too. I lost out on probably $5,000 in brand deals during and immediately after the hacking. My content performance was weaker, so my ad revenue dropped. It took months to rebuild my metrics back to where they were before. But more than the money, it was the lesson I learned about greed and security. I'd gotten greedy. $5,000 a month sounded too good to be true because it was too good to be true. I'd ignored my instincts because I wanted the money so badly. And I'd done the absolute worst thing you can do online, which is give your passwords to a third-party site. Looking back, the red flags were obvious. A company promising huge money, asking for direct password access instead of using official API connections. A website that looked professional but had no real verification. Testimonials from creators I couldn't actually verify existed. I'd been so focused on the opportunity that I'd ignored basic internet security. After I got all my accounts back and secured everything, I did a lot of research on protecting yourself online and avoiding scams. I learned about two-factor authentication, about password managers, about how legitimate companies never ask for your direct password. I learned about phishing scams and how sophisticated they've become. I also learned about talent managers and agents for content creators. Real professionals who help navigate brand deals, negotiate contracts, and avoid scams. After this experience, I decided I needed that kind of protection. I signed with a small agency that represents mid-tier creators. They take 15% of my brand deal income, but in exchange, they vet every opportunity, handle all negotiations, and make sure I'm never in a position to get scammed again. My agent actually reviewed the email from global content partners after the fact. She pointed out multiple red flags I'd missed. The email address wasn't from an official domain, just a generic Gmail account. The company name didn't have any legitimate online presence beyond that one website. The request for direct password access was an immediate disqualifier. She said she sees these scams constantly, and they target creators who are growing quickly but don't have professional representation yet. The whole experience fundamentally changed how I approach my content creation business, because that's what it is now, a business. I'm more careful, more skeptical, more protective of what I've built. I verify everything. I research companies before responding to emails. I never, ever give out my passwords to anyone for any reason. My accounts have recovered now. Actually, they're doing better than ever. I'm at 600,000 followers across platforms and making decent money through legitimate brand partnerships. The house fund is growing steadily, but I'm not in a rush anymore. I learned that desperation and greed make you vulnerable to manipulation. I also share my story sometimes in my content, warning other creators about these scams. The response has been incredible. So many people have reached out saying they almost fell for something similar, or they did fall for it and lost their accounts permanently. It's way more common than I realized. The other thing this taught me is to not put all my eggs in one basket. I've diversified my content across multiple platforms. I've built an email list of my followers so I can reach them even if social media disappears, and I've kept my full-time job as a safety net. Social media fame is fragile and temporary. You have to protect yourself and plan for the worst. So yeah, I almost lost everything I'd built because I got too greedy and ignored basic security. But I got lucky and managed to recover most of it. A lot of creators in similar situations aren't that fortunate. Their accounts get permanently deleted, or they can't prove ownership, or the platforms just never respond. I was one of the lucky ones. These days, when I get an email promising easy money or amazing opportunities, my first instinct is suspicion rather than excitement. That's probably a healthier approach anyway. That's the end of that story. The internet is full of people trying to take advantage of creators who are just trying to make something of their work. It's exhausting having to be constantly on guard, but that's the reality of building anything valuable online. Our final story is about noticing things you wish you hadn't noticed, and then having to figure out what the hell to do about it. I moved into my current apartment complex about 18 months ago. It's a decent place, nothing fancy but well maintained and in a safe neighborhood. My unit is on the second floor, and I have a neighbor directly across the hall from me. When I first moved in, I'd see him occasionally in passing. We'd do the polite nod thing, maybe say hello, but never really had any substantial conversations. He seemed like a regular guy, maybe mid-30s, kept to himself. For the first few months, everything was completely normal. I'd hear him come and go at regular times, sometimes heard his TV through the walls, but nothing excessive. Just standard apartment living with a quiet neighbor. I actually felt pretty lucky compared to some of the nightmare neighbor stories I'd heard from friends. Things started getting weird around the 6-month mark. I began noticing cars pulling up to our building in the evenings, always between 8 and midnight. Not the same car, different vehicles every time. Someone would get out, come into the building, and leave maybe 20 or 30 minutes later. At first, I thought maybe my neighbor had a lot of friends who visited, but the pattern was too consistent and the visits were too brief. Then I started paying more attention when I'd see these visitors in the hallway. They didn't look like people coming over for a social call. They looked nervous, checked their surroundings constantly, kept their heads down. And they were always different people, never the same visitor, twice as far as I could tell. One night, I was coming home from work around 9:30, and I saw one of these visitors leaving my neighbor's apartment. The guy was clearly agitated, moving quickly, and when he passed me in the hallway, I caught a glimpse of what looked like a small plastic baggie in his hand before he shoved it in his pocket. My stomach sank because I realized what I was probably witnessing. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't unsee the pattern. Multiple visitors every evening, quick exchanges, people who looked paranoid and sketchy. My neighbor's apartment had become some kind of hub for what I was pretty sure was drug dealing. Maybe just weed, maybe something harder. I had no way to know for certain, but all the signs were there. I started feeling unsafe in my own building. Every time I came home in the evening, I'd wonder if I was going to run into one of these people in the hallway or the parking lot. I became hyper-aware of every sound from my neighbor's apartment. I'd hear knocks on his door at all hours, quick conversations I couldn't make out, doors opening and closing constantly. The logical thing would have been to report this to the police. Anonymous tip. Let them investigate. Wash my hands of it. But I'd heard enough stories about what happens to people who report drug dealers to know that was potentially dangerous. Even if I reported anonymously, my neighbor might figure out it was me. I was the person directly across the hall who could observe all his activity. If the police raided his place, I'd be the obvious suspect for who called them. And then what? Best case scenario, he gets arrested and I'm fine. Worst case scenario, he figures out I reported him and retaliates. Or one of his associates decides to send a message to discourage future snitches. People have gotten seriously hurt or killed for less. I wasn't willing to risk my safety by being a witness against someone involved in illegal drug activity. But I also couldn't just ignore it. The activity was escalating. More visitors, later hours, increasingly sketchy people coming through the building. I felt like I was living next to a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment, either through violence or a police raid that could endanger everyone in the building. So I started thinking about how I could get my neighbor caught without it being traceable back to me. I needed a strategy that would trigger police involvement, but wouldn't make me the obvious source of the tip. I started documenting everything. I kept a log on my phone of every visitor I saw, noting the time, rough description, and license plate numbers when I could see them from my window. I took photos and videos when I could do so discreetly. Not to use as evidence myself, but to help me establish the pattern and plan my approach. After 2 weeks of documentation, I had a clear picture of the operation. Peak traffic was between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. on weeknights. Weekends were even busier, sometimes a dozen visitors in a single evening. The visitors came from all demographics, young and old, well-dressed and clearly struggling. Whatever my neighbor was selling, he had a diverse customer base. My plan started coming together. I needed to create a situation where the police would have probable cause to investigate my neighbor without me being the obvious source. I couldn't just call in an anonymous tip, because those are often ignored unless there's immediate danger. I needed something more compelling. I started noticing patterns in where the visitors parked. Many of them would park in visitor spots near the building entrance. Some would park in the lot and walk up. A few would idle in the fire lane near the entrance, clearly in a hurry to get in and out. That gave me an idea. What if there was a pattern of suspicious activity that the property management had to address? What if the building management became aware of the issue and had to involve the police for liability reasons? I created an anonymous email account and sent a carefully worded message to our property management company. I didn't accuse anyone specifically. I just expressed concern as a resident about the amount of unknown traffic in the building during evening hours. I mentioned that visitors were frequently propping open the security door, loitering in hallways, and creating a sense of danger for residents. I suggested they might want to review security camera footage from the entrance and parking lot to assess the situation. 3 days later, there was a notice in our building about enhanced security measures. Management reminded residents not to prop doors open, not to allow strangers into the building, and that they'd be monitoring common areas more closely. They also mentioned they'd been reviewing security footage and had identified some concerning patterns. I waited a week, then sent another anonymous email. This time I was more specific. I noted that the suspicious activity seemed concentrated on the second floor, and that I'd personally witnessed what appeared to be hand-to-hand transactions in the parking lot on multiple occasions. I said I was afraid to report this to police directly because I feared retaliation, but I thought management should be aware. That email got a much faster response. 2 days later, I saw the property manager walking through our building with someone who looked like a police officer in plain clothes. They stood in the hallway for a while, seemingly just observing. They looked at the security camera mounted near the elevator. Then the visits to my neighbor's apartment continued as usual for about a week. I started thinking my plan had failed and nothing was going to happen. But then one evening, I came home from dinner around 10 and saw 3 police cars in the parking lot. My heart started pounding. I went up to my floor and the hallway was chaos. Police officers were stationed outside my neighbor's door. I could hear voices inside the apartment, people moving around. One officer asked me if I lived on this floor, and I said yes, across the hall. He asked if I'd noticed any unusual activity, and I played dumb, said I mostly kept to myself and wasn't home much. They were there for hours. I stayed in my apartment, with my ear basically pressed to my door, trying to hear what was happening. Eventually, I heard them bringing my neighbor out. I looked through my peephole and saw him in handcuffs, looking absolutely furious. They led him downstairs, and the police remained in the apartment for a while longer, presumably collecting evidence. The next day, there was a notice on my neighbor's door that the unit had been seized by law enforcement pending investigation. I later found out through building gossip that they'd found a significant quantity of substances, along with cash and paraphernalia, indicating distribution rather than personal use. My neighbor was facing serious felony charges. I felt this overwhelming mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that the danger was gone from my immediate environment. Guilt that I'd orchestrated someone's arrest, even though they were clearly breaking the law and putting everyone at risk. Guilt that maybe he had reasons for doing what he was doing. Maybe he had people depending on him financially. But mostly, I felt vindicated in my approach. By working through the property management and giving them evidence of a pattern, I'd created a situation where they had to involve police for liability reasons. The police investigation came from management concerns about building security, not from a resident tip. Even if my neighbor suspected someone had reported suspicious activity to management, it could have been anyone in the building. There was no reason for him to suspect me specifically. The apartment across from me sat empty for about 2 months, while the legal situation played out. Eventually, a new tenant moved in, a quiet older lady who bakes cookies and shares them with neighbors. The difference in my quality of life and sense of safety is night and day. I never told anyone about my involvement in what happened. Not friends, not family, nobody. The official story, as far as anyone knows, is that property management noticed concerning activity on security footage and involved police. I'm just the neighbor who happened to live across the hall during all of this. Looking back, I think I handled it as safely as I could have. Direct police involvement would have been too risky. Ignoring it would have been irresponsible and would have left me living in fear. My approach was indirect enough to protect my identity while still achieving the goal of removing the threat. The interesting thing is how much I learned about drug dealing from this experience. It's not like the movies where it's obvious criminals in dark alleys. It's normal-looking people in normal buildings conducting quick, efficient transactions that blend into everyday life. If I hadn't been paying attention, I might never have realized what was happening 20 feet from my front door. I also learned that sometimes the right approach isn't the most direct one. Sometimes you have to be strategic and think several steps ahead. I couldn't just report what I saw because that would put me in danger. But I could create conditions where the right people would discover what I'd discovered and take action based on their own investigation rather than my testimony. Did I feel bad about destroying my neighbor's life? A little bit. But then I remind myself that he made the choice to deal out of his apartment. He made the choice to endanger everyone in the building by bringing a constant stream of desperate people through our home. He made the choice to break the law in a way that affected everyone around him. I just made sure there were consequences for those choices, in a way that protected myself. The building is quieter now, safer. I don't jump every time I hear footsteps in the hallway. I don't worry about coming home late at night. I don't wonder if today is the day violence is going to erupt, or a rival dealer is going to show up, or police are going to raid the place with everyone inside at risk. Sometimes, doing the right thing requires creativity and strategy. You can't always take the direct path when the direct path puts you in danger. You have to find another way to achieve the same goal while protecting yourself. That's what I did, and I'd do it again if I had to. That's the end of that story. Dealing with criminal neighbours is one of those situations where there's no perfect solution, just a choice between risky options. At least this person found a way to handle it that minimized their own danger while still addressing the problem. Thanks for hanging with me through these wild tales. If you're not subscribed yet, fix that so tomorrow's stories come straight to you. Comment your favorite below, and I'll catch you in the next video.